There's no reason to become alarmed, and we hope you'll enjoy the rest of your flight. By the way, is there anyone on board who knows how to fly a plane?
The views and opinions expressed on the Avoiding Real Estate Turbulence podcast are strictly those of the hosts and their guests, and do not reflect the opinions of Century 21 Town & Country, Ross Mortgage, or any of their affiliates.
Hey everybody, welcome to Season 2 of Avoiding Real Estate Turbulence podcast. This is your pilot, John Lafferty with Century 21 Town & Country.
And co-pilot Tony Abate with Ross Mortgage, and we are your real estate pilots. Our job is to be a real estate advocate and also make sure you're educated about the buying and selling process. We'll keep you informed throughout until we get you safely closed.
Today's episode is sponsored by Title I. When you're a seller or buyer and you're feeling weary or small, with tears in your eyes, Title I will dry them all. They are on your side. If times get rough and friends can't be found, Title I can be your bridge over troubled title issues. You can reach Title I at 734-427-8000 or email them at
team1@title1inc.net.
I didn't read that third paragraph. That's a good one, John. All right, in a real estate transaction, there are many reasons why you can encounter turbulence. Today we are going to talk all things title with Ken Taylor from Title I. Welcome to the Welcome to the jump seat, Ken.
Welcome to the jump seat.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate
Absolutely. It's our first day, by the way.
It's my first day. I feel like Homer Simpson.
I didn't realize John was such a poet, though.
He is. Holy cow.
Poet.
Skills that I didn't know he had.
I think he wrote it at the traffic light right outside here, sitting in the car. So, no, very good, John. Very good.
In blood. So, Ken, how long have you been in title? What made you get into title? Let's start with just the basics there.
I've been in title insurance for coming up on 14 years now. Been blessed to be with the same company, Title I, the whole time. My mother actually has been in the industry her entire life and got me started. And the more and more I got to know the industry and move in different departments, found out I really enjoyed it and have stuck with it and going to make a whole career out of it.
Okay. Yeah. What do you like about title insurance?
My favorite part about title insurance is, while in practice, all real estate transactions are the same, they're not. The puzzle pieces always are a little bit different. The way to get to a closing table is just a little bit different in every transaction, and that uniqueness is kind of what makes me go every day, that nothing's ever the same. Every transaction, no matter how on paper it looks like it's going to be the same, is always different and new challenges every day. And that's something that I look forward to every day, trying to put the puzzle pieces together to get everyone to a closing table.
Wow.
Yeah. It's one of those unseen functions, we all kind of walk folks through the process, but churning away in the background, literally from start to finish, and even before start, with pre-title and what have you, that is absolutely such a critical piece of the transaction.
That's correct. Yeah, it's a nice search, like I said, keep putting the puzzle pieces together, and it's fun to draw a line from the start to end, and we get to do that on every transaction, which is fun.
What's interesting is you mentioned it's like a crossword puzzle that you're kind of putting the pieces together, and what's actually fun about that in the comparison is on our end, as realtors on a buy side or on a sell side, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're putting the pieces together for a puzzle, and on the lender side, they're doing the same thing with their borrower, putting the pieces together, credit report, and putting a file together and everything else. And a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but quite a few times, my puzzle ain't going to fit the puzzle you have, and it's not going to fit the puzzle you have. So we have 3 different puzzles that we're trying before we get to the closing table to make all work together, and there's sometimes it just doesn't. So we end up putting off closing, and we sometimes don't get to the closing table because of it.
Yeah, it is. It is, like you said, 3 different areas, and it's almost like we're juggling all together, and we're trying to juggle different size balls at the same time and different objects, and we're all trying to get to the same place, but doing it in very different avenues and directions. And not many people see that, obviously, because it's way behind the scenes, and all they're seeing on the front is Oh, they're just showing me a house. Oh, that's, they're just going to give me a bunch of money to buy a house, and this person's going to make me sign a bunch of pieces of paper. It's simple. It's pretty simple, but it's really not. It's a pretty in-depth and intuitive process to get to that point.
So what is title insurance, and is it like is it similar to the undercoating that you're offered at a paint store when they're going to repaint your car and they want to throw in the undercoating for an extra charge that you don't necessarily need? Is title insurance the undercoating, or is title insurance much more important than that?
No, and I might be a little biased, but title insurance is the most important purchase in a real estate transaction. Title insurance is the financial protection for all parties involved against any risk, loss, defect that affects real property or real estate. So it protects everybody to make sure that there is no liens, no encumbrances, and that real property can be transferred from buyer to seller without any hiccups or any future losses or damages. It's a policy that is purchased one time at the closing and is good for the life of that you own that property. And people think, they sometimes get confused with homeowners insurance. It's not the same thing. We're not going to come in, if your basement gets flooded, replace your basement. We're there just to protect the interest that you have in your real estate transaction. And like we said, one-time fee up front, and it protects you for the life that you own the property. So while it seems like a big cost at the beginning, it's a smart investment over the lifetime that you're going to own your real estate or your house or whatever you purchase real estate wise.
Yeah, I can tell you when I'm talking with buyers and we're running through the steps and the costs involved with getting a mortgage, that concept of title insurance it's a little bit nebulous. It's a little hard to wrap your arms around. And I think a lot of consumers, I know I sure did before I was in the business, the idea is there's this deed, this all-important piece of paper that once I hand it from myself to the next person, that's the sale. That's how the ownership transfers. But really, what I hope this is an apt description of it, but what I like to tell folks is, well, what's the makeup of that deed? Is it even valid? Does that person have the right to sell you that property in the first place? Because the deed is only as good as the title insurance backing it up, right?
That's correct, yeah. Because anybody can go, prepare a deed, get it recorded at the county, and transfer ownership. But what we're doing is ensuring that ownership has legal enforceability, and that person who is transferring the property has the authority to do so. You don't want to go buy a real estate transaction from, your aunt who inherited their property from grandma and come to find out that the other two uncles in the family had an interest in the property. That's what we're really here to do, is we take a snapshot of the property, the history of the property, and make sure that the seller has the legal right and the authority to transfer the property cleanly to the purchaser, so they're not going to have any issues moving forward with the ownership of their home.
Yeah, and where the rubber meets the road, or it becomes true insurance, is that if one of those flaws comes up that you described, an unknown owner that bubbles to the surface, or an unknown lien, the insurance company pays a claim, right?
Correct,
They
yep.
make that property owner whole for the loss.
Yep, they will, just like homeowner insurance, you file a claim under your policy, and the underwriters who back all title insurance companies will research what the problem is, and they will make that homeowner whole by either researching and taking care of whatever the claim is, be a, ex, grandma or grandpa who own the house, and making everyone whole. But that's what the policy is there for. They take care of any encumbrances or liens that may pop up after the real estate transaction.
So in a case where you have, well, first let me ask you this. Are there instances where liens or encumbrances on a property are not caught in a title background search and a commitment for title insurance is issued, and then they're only discovered down the road when the next person wants to sell because either somebody's come forward or documents have suddenly appeared? That stuff happens, and that's what title insurance covers as well, correct?
Correct. It does happen. Obviously, we are in the business of, instead of risk mediation or you're assuming risk, we're trying to prevent it. So we obviously do the research of the property, but counties aren't always 100% current to their recording documents. They're obviously busy all the time. So there's a gap period, we call it, between when you close and when the county is recorded to. So there are times that documents get recorded in between or just slightly after, or maybe someone didn't go and record a lien and they thought of it 2 months after you purchased it. But that's what title insurance is there for. They would go and then at that point, if it was found out, and correct whatever is needed. If there was a lien because you did some work on the property and a contractor didn't get paid and they filed a lien 6 months after you sold the house. That's what title insurance would go back, take care of it, because that does happen sometimes where post-closing either it was recorded late or someone had a lien that they were going to record and just forgot, and they went and put it against the property anyways, even after the homeowner sold it. That's what the title insurance is there for, to help protect the new homeowner, that they will have free and clear ownership of their property.
And then the title company goes after the previous homeowner to make themselves whole.
Correct, yeah. With underwriters, do their due diligence, hire attorneys to go after the parties who are ultimately responsible for the defects that have occurred either before closing or immediately after.
I think it's an interesting progression, probably long before any of us were in the business, before there was such a thing as the common title insurance policy. It was abstracted title, wasn't it? And correct me if I've got this wrong, but that was basically where you want to buy a piece of property, you hire an attorney to do the search, and he comes up with that search or abstracted title, and he says, there's the history of this property. Have a nice day.
Yep.
And it was kind of upon whomever was looking at those documents to make sure that title was perfected. And if there was some flaw that was discovered at a later date, probably the only recourse was to sue. Mm-hmm. Whereas now title insurance makes it a far more protective and less risky thing, where it's like, well, if it's not discovered until after the fact, there's an insurance policy behind it. That's kind of how it flows?
Correct.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And now title companies, we take on that abstracting portion. It's our job to, and the standard is 40 years. We go back 40 years in a property and look at the whole snapshot in that 40 years. What has happened in that 40 years, and what do we need as a title insurance company to take care of in order to transfer that property from a seller to a buyer free and clear. And that's really on us in the background to take care of that.
40 years. I don't think I ever knew that. I knew it was a look back, but I don't know if I just assumed it was to infinity or what.
40 years, so that takes us to 70, right?
Yeah.
A lot of curiosity. When you're going back and you're looking at properties that are located in neighborhoods, subdivisions, maybe where association language was inserted. You know where I'm going with this? Okay.
I think so.
So where language was discriminatory and exclusionary for certain groups, for certain races. I'm just wondering how much of that you come across nowadays, or are we at 1970, when you go back 40 years, do you not really see it that much anymore?
You still see it. Typically what we call, they're in deed restrictions is how we would take them. But typically, even going back 40 years, those deed restrictions, they follow the life of the property. Even if it's, we only went back 40 years and that deed restriction was put on 50 years before that, it still follows the life of the property. Now, laws have obviously changed, so it's almost cancels it out, but you can't, deed restrictions aren't something that you can just remove. They follow the life of the property, but there's other laws that kind of counteract or contradict what those are. But yeah, they follow the life. And we do run into them. You do see them. There are some pretty funny ones. There's one, I live in Milford. There's a deed restriction, you can't have chickens in the village of Milford. And that runs with every property,
Wow.
which I find to be funny. Not that I was going to, but it's specific in there.
In the deed restrictions.
Yep.
Wow, interesting.
No chickens.
Oh.
Tony wouldn't make it.
I would.
No,
Yeah, I'd have to move out. Yeah.
Good.
So yeah, you put an interesting spin on that though. So the deed restrictions don't go away. They follow the life of that property. They just become unenforceable if they are restricting something that, protected class, I
Yep.
guess is what it would be
Yep.
considered.
Correct.
So interesting. So you probably do still see the language.
Yep, you
Oh,
still see it,
okay.
especially in the, what you should call the older neighborhoods, Detroit, Dearborn Heights, where obviously Michigan's main population really started and kind of grew out. There's still some of those in there.
The points.
Yes, those two as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's another. I won't bring that up. But I'd love to have a conversation about that one day. Okay, so let's talk about that. We kind of touched on what title insurance is, kind of why, if you're a buyer, you want to have it, and as a seller, it covers. You're covered from your previous policy. So if I'm a seller and I've lived in my house for 10 years and I was given a commitment for title insurance when I bought the property, why can't I just hand that to the buyer and say, hey, here you go. I bought my house cash and there's no liens on the property. So here you go, Mr. Buyer. Here's your commitment for title insurance from the previous title company 10 years ago.
Yep. Two things on that. One, no matter, not that you don't want to be a trusting individual, but anybody has the right to lien a property. So even if you were the most upstanding citizen, you're friends with everybody, let's say that even a mistake was made. You could still discover a lien on a property. That does happen quite often where maybe a county recorder inputted something wrong, or they put a wrong lot number or even section or township in the legal description when filing a lien. It could arbitrarily be placed on your house. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not ways to take care of it or remove it, but that still could be a lien, even if it's an arbitrary lien. So no matter even how confident you are that there's not a lien on the property, it's still the best idea to have that reassurance, to have that research again done, so that if I'm a buyer, I would like, hey, I still want a snapshot. If it was 1 month or 10 years, I want to make sure that nothing has happened so that I can have it free and clear. Second one is state of Michigan. I have yet to see a purchase agreement where it doesn't have listed in the purchase agreement that the seller is to provide owner's title insurance policy to the purchaser. State of Michigan is a title insurance state, and that's in every purchase agreement that the seller is to provide a title insurance policy to the purchaser. So even if you were wanting to get away with, no, we'll just use the last one, you still need a new one every time.
I can see that. With the risk being absorbed by the title company before that conveys and a new person is now insured, they would want to say, hold the phone here. We got to do a little research and find out what happened during that window of time. Yeah, not assignable.
Correct.
Can you talk about the difference between a commitment for title insurance that the seller provides and the title insurance that a buyer is required to purchase if they're getting a loan on the property?
Yeah. Well, the seller is providing an owner's policy to the purchaser that is stating that the buyer will own that free and clear, that there is no liens or encumbrances on the property.
And if there are, they'll be satisfied at closing.
Correct. And they'll be all taken care of and transferred. They'll be able to have that deed, what they call without any liens. The buyer's, or what we call the lender's policy, that is required when there is a lender involved. What that does, and this sounds a little ominous, a lender's policy is there to enforce the foreclosability of a mortgage. Sounds kind of ho-hum. But if the buyer does not oblige by the terms and conditions of their note that they sign, when the bank says we're going to give you $200,000, then that policy says the bank has the first right to take the house back. And that's why all lenders require a title policy, because they, they put a lot of money or a lot of interest in a property, and they want to make sure that if you don't do what you have said you were going to do, that bank has the right to recoup their losses by taking the house back and then being able to sell it again. So that's why it's required for every transaction that a buyer purchases a policy for the lender. Kind of an added layer of insurance for that bank to make sure that they're getting their payment every month.
Well, and I think added to that, let's fast forward and say that we do, as a lender, have to foreclose on a property. We want to have the same protection as, now we're the new owner.
Mm-hmm.
We want to have that same unencumbered protection as the previous owner did as well. And that's what that title insurance does for us, right?
Yep.
And, we're protected to the size of the loan, and the owner is protected to the size of the price they've paid for the property. But, when you think about it, the foreclosing lender, they would want to know that it didn't come with a lot of title baggage attached to it if they, heaven forbid, we have to do the foreclosure.
Yep. They want to spend extra money on clearing up things that should have been taken care of. So every time it's enforced for every real or mortgage transaction must have a lender's policy to make sure that lender has that protection as well.
Can you talk about an owner's policy, what a typical owner's policy looks like? So typically we see Schedule A, Schedule B. Can you just walk us through what a typical owner's policy is going to look like, and what somebody who's never looked through a owner's policy before, what they should be looking for, and where things are kind of located?
Yep. It's usually broken up into three parts: Schedule A, B, or Schedule A, Schedule B, and Schedule B2. Schedule A is just kind of giving you the summary. This is the property. This is the legal description of the property. Says the owner, current owner, which would be the purchaser, and the amount of the insured. So it will tell you how much your policy is insured for. Schedule B would reference any we call items that we are insuring with the loan. If it's a cash sale, there's no lender. It's blank in essence. It just says you're responsible to pay your taxes for any future taxes, any assessments that pop up in the future, registered with the city or county. If there was a mortgage taken out, it references that in Schedule B, saying you also are responsible under the terms of this mortgage. And if you do not, then the bank will take the house back. Schedule B2 is probably the one that confuses people the most. We call that the exception page. Those are items, much like deed restrictions, that run with the life of the property, that do not hinder, do not hurt anybody, but they're items like easements, right-of-ways, power lines that would go in. If DTE had to go in there, they would have what they call an egress or ingress access to those items, just there for your benefit. So you know that people aren't just arbitrarily coming on your yard or coming in your property, but they're items that run with the life of the loan or life of the property, that allow certain people access for certain utilities or items of that nature. And that's usually where people get tripped up, because they say, well, what do you mean I don't own this? Or people have the right, but you want to be able to have DTE come and fix your box if you have trouble, or to fix your power lines, or the city to come fix any sewer lines that are on there. But that's it. There's 3 sections, and it just kind of gives a little bit of summary of what the whole process you went through, and that's what you have as protection for anything that were to pop up either before your closing or popped up after, that were not for you, if it was a previous owner or anything of that nature.
Okay.
You bring up something, and I'm sorry, I know we got some questions here. Something just occurred to me. Years ago, there were mortgage surveys done on almost every transaction.
Right.
They were
not that many years ago, even.
You're right.
Maybe 20 years ago. They were done.
Yeah, if that. It seems like maybe just pre-recession is where they kind of faded away. And as old school guy, I've always been an advocate of you kind of want that survey. It's not that expensive, and it can show you a lot. And then the fact that that's faded away and is almost non-existent now for most real estate residential transactions. they're just not needed anymore. And I think a lot of it has to do with the coverage that is provided by the title company against boundary disputes, what have you. Is that something that changed over time, or is it just a new view from the lender perspective, or why did we always need them to the point where now we never need them?
I think what it was is underwriters kind of got together as a whole, especially with the advent of site condominiums and subdivisions that have popped up that way. Underwriters have kind of gone with, we have a plat map or the drawing of the boundary lines. We have recorded exceptions or easements and egresses, and we're going to have every homeowner sign an affidavit attesting that they haven't changed their boundary lines since they've owned the property. They haven't put a fence on the boundary line. We're going to have them all attest to that, and they felt that was enough of a strong coverage to where they didn't need the mortgage survey anymore to ensure that where the boundary lines are at. I think they might have gotten a little push from maybe realtor associations saying, well, it's another cost that's being incurred to my customer. They have to go get a survey that might cause a delay. So they kind of went away with having to require that survey to give that boundary line coverage. They just decided with all the information that they had, and especially with the seller testing, no, I haven't done anything. And that's kind of a big thing, because if you then did go back and say, or found out later that the seller did change the boundary line, they have a sworn affidavit saying, no, I swear I didn't.
I've never been comfortable with that change.
No.
I got to say, I prefer it when the transaction closes with the survey, but they're unicorns. You just don't have, unless you've got a really oddly shaped property or it's adjacent to water or something that says you really should have one. They're just not done.
Yeah, and you see it more now, new construction by the water, and acreage. Acreage still is the highest. Yeah. Because it's not as simple as, well, this is the lot that we have. It's, it's from a point of beginning, and there's a whole bunch into it with what they call meets and bounds coverage. So that those are the three typically. You do still see them, but like you still said, not as highly as you used to.
I guess I think back to when we were doing them regularly, and I know you ran across this too, John, in transactions, even on the lot, block, and sub legal descriptions, you just ran into stuff. It's like, oh, what's that shed doing there? Or wow, that's a pretty big deck, but what do you know? It's encroaching out over the neighbor's line, and stuff that was just discovered that didn't stop happening. We're just not seeing it anymore, and maybe we've all just become a little more lenient overall. But I tell you, I would, if it came back into the fold and surveys were needed on these transactions, I would not protest. What, $150 maybe for a survey. It's a pretty inexpensive look in my view, but that's the old man talking, I guess, in me that that likes to see them. I mean, but you probably had to address concerns with buyers and sellers.
Let me just say this: I've had a couple buyers do surveys, not acreage, but just hey, it's a lot in Royal Oak. We're going to do a survey on this because I want to know what my boundaries are. I want to make sure that the neighbor's garage or my garage, because they're both, one's in the right-hand back end of the lot, mine's in the left-hand back of the lot. I want to make sure that I'm not encroaching on his, he's not encroaching on mine. So he decided to get a survey done. It's a standard Royal Oak lot, 50 wide by 110 deep. Not a big deal. $750.
Oh.
That is standard, my friend.
No, that had to be a stake survey.
Well, yeah, it was a stake survey.
Okay.
Yeah,
we never did those for mortgages, though.
Well, but I mean, finding a survey company that, and most of these guys, survey companies are busy. They're, you're 3 weeks, a month out. So you're talking about delaying a transaction. Yeah. You're talking about another $700 to $1,000 in coverage. Also, what do you do in the instance where a house butts up against a lake, and now, or our mutual client had to get an elevation survey. If you remember who I'm talking about,
Yeah.
he had to pay for an elevation survey because he had a main artery of a river running through the back part of his property.
Really?
And he had to pay for an elevation survey for insurance purposes. I don't think it was for your purposes. I think it was for insurance purposes. He had to get an elevation survey.
Yeah.
And I think that was $1,000. So he ended up spending, I want to say he had out of pocket another $2,000 between the survey itself and the elevation survey.
Yeah.
In addition to all his other costs.
Yeah. I think we're, and again, I know I'm the advocate for the survey, I guess, but I think we're looking at some different things. You have the, I think more accurately called the mortgage certificate survey, which didn't take 3 weeks because they weren't super duper precise, right? I mean, they're kind of just confirming this is what the plat map says, this is what we appear to have, and then they can shoot a line and say, well, there's that deck kicking out over the line. Where the stake survey, they're going to get out there and they're going to be super precise.
Right.
And it does take longer. Yep. And then the elevation surveys, we usually see that in the context of maybe disputing a flood zone determination, and those last two, John, no disagreement. Those get really expensive and they're time consuming, no doubt about it.
I guess from my perspective, if you're going to have a survey, why, if you're gonna have a survey, if it's going to be required, why would you take hey, this guy's going to show up, he's going to run a digital line to make sure just the property is this way, and all right, we're good. $250 later, we're on our way to closing. I mean, if you're a homeowner and you actually want to have a survey, why wouldn't you want to have it staked so you know exactly where your boundaries are? Well, I don't know. I mean, if it's gonna go that route, then go all in. If you're gonna require a survey, then make it a stake survey so it's official.
Yeah. I see the point. I think maybe it's sometimes a judgment call. I mean, if you're looking at that property and the property lines are relatively clear, sometimes you got the power pole in a corner or something like that. And then, as I referenced earlier, you've got that really, really cool deck that's been added on, or maybe a dormer that was added to the house or something. And you wanted something that was going to show all the parties, we've got an encroachment here. I would argue that the mortgage certificate would at least start that conversation. Maybe if it got hot and heavy with attorneys involved, it would have to be escalated to a stake survey. But I would stay in the camp that says that mortgage certificate is still going to identify some things and give you something in writing that is more than just someone's opinion that says, you know what, I think you poured your driveway a little wide, or I think you built that deck a little bit too big. So I hear you. Also, too, they're quicker. I mean, in my experience, and granted, it's been a while since we've done them, mortgage certificate surveys are a couple days out.
Yeah.
And between $100 and $200 is a rule, right?
Yeah,
so,
right around. It depends on how large.
Again, I wouldn't say that everybody agrees with my position, but I would argue for that cost, you get some pretty good information with what's out there. But I know it's kind of sounding like the whole back in my day type of a conversation.
Well, sometimes I would say that something like that comes back. Let's say that it's not a precise boundary measurement. It's a here. Okay, we're going to do the best we can with where the boundaries are, and let's say that they come back and say, "Oh boy, looks like the driveway is about half a foot on the neighbor's property, and this could be an issue down the road." And now the whole transaction is in. Now they have to pay for a survey on top of that to make sure, at least you want to make sure that it is 6 inches encroached on the neighbor's property and not just, okay, this guy says it is, but what if it isn't?
Sure.
I don't know. I think you open up a whole nother can of worms. I think if a buyer wants a survey and they want to get one, pay the money, get the real deal, satisfy yourself, done and over with. Whereas this other one, I think there's the potential there to raise way more issues. I don't know.
That's fair. What I can see, and this is, does it raise an issue? Yeah. Should it raise an issue? Maybe so. Maybe it is something that should be looked at. It's a step to take to have a certain level of validation before you spring for the bigger survey. And again, it's not to the millimeter accurate. I get that, but it's quick, it's relatively inexpensive, and it can be telling as far as validating a concern, or maybe showing concern that nobody knew was there in the first place, and then it can be kicked up to the next level. I guess my position, if it's not done, you never know.
Where do they find these people to do these mortgage surveys?
I don't know.
I mean, are these actual land surveys
Oh, yeah,
that are going out and doing
yeah,
it?
absolutely. Yeah. Same survey
as many
companies that do
companies,
the
but yeah.
stake surveys will do that. Locally here, the Chemtex and the
Chemtex,
George
yeah.
Jeromes, they'll do that.
They will do a mortgage survey,
Oh, yeah.
a real simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like Tony said, mortgage survey, because there are still rare times, but because we used to, back in the day, have to order them all the time, and typically they want to see our commitment because it gives a legal description, they give us so they can see everything that we have pulled the public record, and then they go out and, like I said, 4 days, $100, $200, kind of right in that range, depending on how big the property is.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. In certain locales, it was a title company that would order them.
Yeah, we would order them all the time.
Yeah, I miss them. I guess that's my point.
I could see a use for them in perhaps communities where houses are on larger lots, and maybe odd shaped lots. I could see a purpose for them, but I think your standard 1950s, 40s, 60s, 70s subdivisions where cyclone fence has been up for 30 years. I don't know. I think there's no reason to have those at that point.
Clearly, the industry has decided the
same thing,
and we have not. Have you seen a big uptick in boundary dispute claims through the? Yeah, so there's something to it, interesting thing that I saw sometime years ago, and it was discovered in a mortgage certificate, is you got a relatively newer sub, nice simple rectangles, typical scenario. One guy at the end of the block, and I'm going to pull some numbers out of the air here. He said, I've got 60 feet from the side of my house to my lot line. And survey comes back, and he's got 35 feet. It's like, what the heck? That's not right. Well,
erosion.
Could have been. But actually what happened is that the first house at the end of the block that was built first was parked in the wrong spot. And then that one set the pace for the next house, and the next house, and the next house, and the next house. They were all in the wrong spot, but it wasn't discovered till that end house was built, and then there was a desire to see, well, how far am I from my lot line? And very unique situation. I've seen it once in 30 years. But that was how do you correct that now? I mean, I don't remember what they did, quite honestly. It is what it is. You're not going to move 30 houses or redraw the plat. But it was discovered with a mortgage certificate, I will say that. So you probably, I sound like I'm on the payroll of a survey company, don't I? But
we're gonna go out and there's a Chemtex sticker on the back of Tony's bumper.
Jeez. Tell you. Well, so we're talking about this. Let's go right into and talk about. In a lot of purchase contracts, there is language that says a title policy shall be issued with standard exemptions, and others have said there will be a title policy existed without standard exemptions. What's the difference, and what are typical standard exemptions that are being excluded and then included?
Yep. You're getting still a title insurance policy if you're getting with or without. The without is has a little more, I guess, oomph to it. Because with standard exceptions, you are taking exception to, meaning you are not covered by any boundary lines. You're not covered by, and that's really the biggest one. You're not covered by boundary line exceptions. Without means we're removing that exception, meaning you are covered, and that's probably the biggest one. Probably where Tony was going to advocate more for mortgage surveys, but again, as long as the seller has attested in an affidavit that they haven't moved boundary lines, most underwriters will still issue that policy without standard exceptions. It also, with exceptions. Another big one is mechanics liens, where new builds, renovations, those don't get covered. And that's, I just listened to our Michigan, one of our Michigan agency representatives state that, again, for the however many years in a row, mechanics liens are the number one claim under a title insurance policy. You have work done on the property, you don't pay that contractor, it comes right over and puts a lien on the property because they want their money. And with doesn't cover you for that, without does, and that's probably it's a very big reason to, I would always suggest doing without exceptions for your policy. It just gives a little more coverage and protection for you as not only seller, but the purchaser and everyone involved.
I haven't seen a chart in years. Is there a cost difference with and without?
Nope,
or is it
not
just a
with
choice?
Just a choice.
Yeah. So why would anybody not? But you hear those stories about the mechanics liens too, and it's and what seems to bubble to the surface a lot is that some can be like you described. The homeowner didn't pay a contractor, but the scarier ones, in my view, is when a homeowner hires a general contractor. The general contractor doesn't pay a subcontractor.
Right.
Out of the purview of the homeowner.
Yep.
It's not his business. It is, but it isn't. And then that subcontractor liens that property.
Correct.
Yeah, that's scary stuff.
It's very scary stuff, and it's probably our not number one battle, but it's our number one, or at least one of our top ones of what we try to clear or for our title requirements is making sure if you bought a house a year ago for $50,000 and you're turning around in 8 months and selling it for $150,000, we kind of know something's happened. I mean, we know the market's been rising, but that's a pretty high tick. And we'll ask those questions. We'll see, was any contractors hired? Was work done on the property? Okay, well, let's take a look. We want the main form is called a sworn statement and a waiver. Sworn statement is the general contractor stating, I did this amount of work, plumbing, heating and cooling, cabinets for this amount. I paid this amount. And then a waiver is that subcontractor stating, yep, I've been paid in full and I won't lien the property.
Yeah, check and balance.
Check and balance. And that's our number one, fight, especially in today's market where people are buying a lot of, houses and flipping them and reselling them.
And new construction
and
too,
new construction
right?
as well. And, we get a lot of pushback as a lot of homeowners state, I did all the work. It was all me. I did everything. Which maybe they did. People are handy. I'm not, but people are handy. But, you didn't go and mill the wood. You didn't probably make the granite countertops yourself. And, suppliers are among contractors that can lien the property. Lowe's has the right to lien the property. The granite company, you might have been the installer, but if you didn't pay the granite company, they can come back and lien the property. So, that's been a big uptick in title, I guess, clearing and requirements in the past probably 5 years has been the biggest fight, is making sure that we are getting rid of that mechanics lien worry and that contractor coming back and liening the property.
Well, how deep do you guys go then? If let's just say you have a new construction and you've got the buy side, the owner says, well, here's my owner's policy. How is it on the sell side that it's their responsibility to get the names of the contractors, subcontractors, to make sure that they all sign a waiver? Is it on them or is it on you as the buy side to do that?
We take it seriously on all sides. We take it a little more seriously on the buy side if we're representing a lender, because what people won't know is a mechanics lien will jump the mortgage lien position. So a mechanics lien will go in front of the lender's lien position, causing them not to be able to foreclose the home. So we take that pretty seriously. We want to make sure that, hey, we're telling the bank as a title company, we've cleared everything so that you have foreclosability. Well, if we don't double check and contractor liens the property and all of a sudden the bank can't, well, they're going to be pretty upset at us, and we don't want that to happen. So it's really on who's ever representing the seller to work with them, get in contact, either the seller directly getting their general contractor to fill out that sworn statement, getting waivers from the subcontractors. But, there's been times where we've forced the issue a little bit because we want to protect everyone involved. And that's the main. We want to eliminate the risk moving forward, and that's really what we'll do. But yeah, mechanics liens will jump the lender's policy, and we want to make sure that is.
You brought up an interesting scenario I never really thought about, and boy, this is a cautionary tale for consumers. And so, a home buyer looks at a new home, and it's been flipped, pretty darn common over the last handful of years, and that seller says just what you said. I'm a craftsman. I did all this work myself. I'm very proud of what I did. But if he obtained a granite countertop from a local stone supplier or something and never paid that company, even though he installed it, that granite supplier can lien the property that it was installed in. Wow. That's so in other words, it's not a get out of jail free safety net to hear okay, the homeowner did all the work himself, therefore there's not going to be any construction related liens. There absolutely could be.
Correct.
Wow.
And we don't want to be so, pessimistic and skeptical of everybody, but you got to be a little realistic in terms of you can be handy and we get it, but you didn't, unless you are that handy where you're milling the wood, you're building the cabinets all yourself, it's highly unlikely that you're doing all of it by yourself.
Interesting.
So the main lesson here then is if you're buying a new construction, a home that's been flipped, or just a regular home in general, you want to make sure that you get a title policy without standard exemptions to protect you from any type of mechanics liens that could be coming down the road.
Correct. Yep. And that's like we said before, it's the number one claim, and then it's our underwriter hiring an attorney, going after the previous owner to make sure that they pay the contractor to remove that lien. But that's been the battle past, 5-7 years. That's been the number one thing as houses, people were buying them when they were still a little low, turning around, fixing them up, selling them. So it's a lot of work, and sometimes you offend people because they're going to tell you that, no, why don't you trust me that I paid for it? And I want to, but also it's a lot of trust, and it's a lot of money is involved when buying and selling a house. So you want to make sure you are dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's.
It's so interesting as I think that through. You could have that craftsman homeowner who did the flip, and it could be something as simple as saying, well, you know what? That granite that I installed, that is absolutely not the color and design that I asked for, so I never paid that shop. It's fine, but it's not what I ordered, so I didn't pay them. Could be a legitimate dispute, but now suddenly that becomes that new home buyer's, the new homeowner's problem.
Yep.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So and like John said, new construction big as well. I think we're at a good point. There was obviously a lot of builders kind of went away during the recession period, and the good ones stuck through. But builders are very aware of that because it's on them. They're the general contractor, so they're going to get hit the most if they don't do their due diligence the way we ask them to. So yeah, that's a standard requirement on every new construction to get a whole list of sworn statements and waivers to call on.
Okay.
I think we're
What do you think? Are we
I think we're
hitting the stops?
Well,
good stuff.
we still got a lot. I still have a lot of stuff here for you, Ken. Would you mind coming back next time for our next episode?
Whatever you would like.
Maybe we'll do 5 or 10 questions.
Perfect.
Have them back. Well, I'd like to thank Ken Taylor with Title One for stopping by today and appearing on our episode to answer title questions. Ken, if somebody has title issues or wants to order an owner's title policy or have you get a lender's policy for them, how do they reach Title One? Again, let's remind them.
Phone number 734-427-8000, or email us at team1@title1inc.net.
And Inc. is spelled INC.
INC, correct.
INC, right.
Yeah, always there, happy to talk. We're here, want everyone to have great experience, and happy to help anybody that needs any title insurance questions.
Well, Ken, I can tell you, we're proud to have you as a business partner. You guys do a phenomenal job with what you do.
We love working with you guys.
Absolutely.
A pheromonal job.
A pheromonal job. Exactly. Got to stop using the big words, right? Yeah. Thank you for listening to Avoiding Real Estate Turbulence. If you'd be so kind to subscribe and review and rate, we would appreciate it. Please share with your friends, family, and coworkers that they too can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and AvoidingRET.com, where you'll find our contact information and every episode. You can also find us on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Spotify.